Greetings. We are here, Habari Gani, as we said in Kwanzaa, Nkosi Sikelele, Africa. Malapakaniso Pandawayo. Iswe Imetando Zoyetu Nkosi Sikelele. To say those words to greet you, we are here in 2021, and we say those words first to let you know in the motherland's tongue we do this show. Not because we hope we could 525,600 minutes be with you, which we can't, or for 24/7, 365 days of the year be with you because we can't, but we will be with you for a weekly 52 weeks with It Is Our Duty. Welcome to It Is Our Duty. This is our third week. We are excited to bring to you with us, we have Ashanti Binta. Welcome, Ashanti.
Can you see me? I'm
I
only
can
half.
see you.
I'm only
Yeah.
halfway on the screen. Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can, let's see if we can change that the way you are. Yeah, there you are. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you
It
for
was
having
hard.
me.
You're welcome. Well, it was hard to get you on here as far as the sound, but that's okay. We've made it to our show.
Yeah.
And that's what it's going to be like for 2020 into 2021.
I'm sure.
So I want to give you just since you have you here and we talk time, I want to show a couple of clips. It's just going to introduce you.
Okay.
We don't want to delay, but we have that flexibility in social media.
Okay.
We have the flexibility to do that. So the first clip in introducing you is to show the legacy of what Black liberation is about. And I'm so glad what you've done. And so this first clip that we are going to show, let's see if I can get them all lined up, is to show a history of what has happened in the United States in the past. Yes. And so this first clip that I am going to show for those of you in our audience, we're having a hard time with this show broadcast today, so we missed the beginning, which is about the parable of the sower community that hosts this program. But we have been sharing our screen a visual that talks about the first convention. And when I say first convention, I'm talking about, and I've got echo on my phone, so I'm really trying to figure out how to say this without being off track here. So this, let's see if we can pull it up. And that's all right. But I think I've got it. Let's try it. We're going to share screen. All right. Let's see if it lets me. Yes. We go. So this first clip that we have here, if you can see that, is the 1830 National Negro Convention. On this clip, it shows you that there was a gathering of our people in the past. And when I say a gathering of our people, I mean we had Black abolitionists that said no more to how we were treated as people. There were free slaves. There were those that were crossed over to go into another area. But this was a civil rights organization that the National Negro Convention founded to talk about that history and that legacy that we're going to get to you. So I want to do that first. We're going to take that off the spotlight. Okay, and by just putting three of us on, let's see if I can do that now. There it is. And bring us back.
Your video, your audio is breaking up really bad.
Is okay. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself while I work on the thing, and maybe tell a little bit about what you know of that historical pretense when we say us gathering as a people. So I'll let you introduce.
Well, my name is okay. My name is Ashaki Benta, and I'm a longtime activist in the Black Liberation Movement. Have worked all my life for the liberation of our people. I started in my youth as a teenager in Gary, Indiana, and I was still a teenager in 1972 when the National Black Assembly came to Gary, and it was at one of the high schools in Gary, Westside High School, and that's when I began to, learn about the various organizations, including the Congress of African People, and Leroy Jones and Mary Baraka was the um, leader during that period, and it was on closed circuit television in Gary, and so that's how I was, not knowing anyone there or what was going on, but that's how I was able to follow it, and so it was a great, inspiring convention in 1972. So I've been active since then. We began to organize in Gary during that period around the question of community rights and needs, and we had the first black mayors in the 1960s, Mayor Hatcher, and we organized city forums around Gary and asked them to come out and speak to various communities. And so those were my first organizing forays in my youth. So the National Negro Convention movement is very, very important part of our history. And a lot of these things we, at least when I was coming up, and I'm pretty sure today as well, having been a substitute teacher in the public school systems in the last few years, this kind of history, our real history, is not taught to our youth or in the various schools, and so we lack knowledge of what the full extent of our struggle has been to liberate ourselves. But the Negro Convention movement started back in the 1800s, 1830s, and maybe some of our young people don't know that even during slavery, by the time of the advent of the Civil War, there were 4 million slaves, but there were something like 300,000 free, so-called free Africans who lived in various parts of the northern states, and these so-called free blacks began the process of the Negro Convention movement in order to discuss, to find ways to fight, because even though they were supposedly free and in the North, it was clear to everyone that no one was really free if there was 4 million slaves, primarily in the southern states. So these Negro Convention movements started coming out of the black abolitionists calling those movements, these conventions, in order to fight, to find a way to end and overturn slavery. So that was, politically, some of the most important actions that African American people took in order to liberate ourselves. So I think in our youth we're taught that, so-called Lincoln freed the slaves, but it's actually we ourselves who freed ourselves and fought in the Civil War. We met in these convention movements. Escaped slaves would sometimes attend them if they could. And so that was a part of the beginning of the Black Liberation Movement. One of the
Yes.
significant contributions to in that period that still resonates today uh, was called David Walker's Appeal, and it's hard to, I guess, grasp, and hundreds of years later, how important this writing was from uh, one of the Black Liberation Movement activists during that period, and he did a series of writings and published them. And it was an appeal to black people to organize themselves and to fight
Right.
to liberate themselves. And some of us call that the beginning of revolutionary nationalism. There was a lot of discussion during that period with regard to how to solve our problem, the question of ending slavery. And so there were thoughts about Pan-Africanism. This is
Right.
different from the the establishment of Liberia as some kind of alternative to send black people back to Africa
Right.
that started in that period. But these were independent movements
Yeah.
among the so-called free blacks and the escaped slaves in order to,
Uh-huh.
find a way to liberate ourselves. And so people recognized that we were an African people, and, part of the thinking was as an African people, we need to try to liberate ourselves everywhere we are.
Yeah,
And of
right
course,
there
the
is
Great Haitian
perfect.
Revolution was one of the factors that
Uh-huh.
came into play during the 19th century
Yeah, so
with
right there,
regard to
good point.
liberating
Can you hear me
African
okay?
people.
Can you hear me?
Anita, I hear you. I see you speaking, but it's coming
Okay.
across as just a buzz.
Okay. Can you
So
see the screen that says
I can't understand what
1970?
you say, or
Oh, okay. Wow.
mm,
So we're
you
gonna
may have
go.
some questions that you want to relate.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see the
The
screen.
1970 Congress of African People?
Yes. Hmm.
Beautiful. So that's going right to our next spot of liberation in this country. So I'm glad you gave your 2 cents. So here you can see some of those that were involved in 1970 Congress. So I wanted to see if you can say some words on this as well.
Well, the Congress of African People was the first organization that I joined in my youth. And this was during the period when it was transforming itself from a kind of nationalism or cultural nationalism to what Amir Baraka called Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought. And so this Congress of African People was transitioning to a kind of Marxist analysis of our conditions here within the United States. And it stems again from, kind of drew from David Walker's appeal of calling on people, the slaves themselves, to come forward and fight and free themselves. And so a kind of revolutionary nationalism. And so in Gary, at 17th and Broadway or so, there was a branch established of the Congress of African People. And so as a teenager, I joined that organization. And that was my first foray. And we held a number of meetings at the center there on Broadway, and organized these community meetings with Mayor Hatcher. And we also had the first study group that I joined politically. The first uh, study that we had was a book called Political Economy by A. Yontiev. And
Yeah,
we had a study group around that, and that's the way I began. And
beautiful.
during that period, I also, for the first time,
That's
read one of my favorite all-time books, still to this day, the autobiography of Malcolm X, which was very had a great impact on my thinking and my life at that time. There was another book that I studied called The Choice, and it was dealing with the struggle of black people against the Vietnam War. And, so these were kind of political texts that I was getting involved in. And, of course, learning about the great inspiration of Mao Zedong and the Chinese Revolution. So those were, that was kind of the beginning orientation I had into, uh, the revolutionary struggle in those days.
Can you see that screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if my sound is off, but if whatever screen shows, we'd love to hear your thoughts too. So I'm going to mute myself. And now we have the 1974 Conference of African Liberation.
Yes, the Congress of ALSC, the Congress of African, the African Liberation Support Committee, was also another revolutionary effort to bring the struggle of the African American people together with other struggles throughout Africa in order to free ourselves and begin to recognize African Liberation Support Day and to organize around questions of black liberation. What is the best approach? How do we best solve the problem of our liberation in the so-called belly of the beast here in the United States? So this was a extremely important development that took place with regard to, and it was a major organization nationally and internationally in the United States during that period. So another of our tremendous efforts to, of course, I was still, 74, still a kid, so I wasn't aware of it as much at the time, but years later, I came to learn about the importance and significance of it.
Well, here we are, the one you mentioned earlier.
A number of comrades that I know were involved.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
This
and then
next one.
there in 1972,
Yes.
when the National Black
Let's talk
Assembly
about
came, that was my initiation into the revolutionary, nationalist movement. So it was a very exciting time. I so admired Amiri Baraka. He was such an inspiration, and just seeing, so many black people in town. Of course, Jesse Jackson was there. Mayor Hatcher was a part of it. And so it was very inspirational, very interesting for me as a young teenager, looking at this gathering as a result of our struggle. And of course, in Malcolm was assassinated in 1965, but Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, as we all know, and also that same year, later. That same year, Robert Kennedy was assassinated in California. So these were kind of momentous times and momentous events. And I remember as a youth, when after the assassination of Dr. King, I wrote a letter. I was still a kid then, 68. I was probably about 14 or 15 years old, 13 maybe. And I sent a letter to the family, Dr. King's family, and especially to their oldest daughter, Yolanda, and sent my, my concern and love for them and appreciation of the sacrifice they had made. And I think I asked them in the letter, did they think the government had killed their father, that kind of thing as a kid. And actually, some months later, I did get a card back from Dr. King's family. I don't know whatever happened to that, but I remember getting it. Of course, they didn't answer any of my questions that I put in the letter, but they did send a response. So those were some important days, my orientation toward the struggle. 1967 National Conference on Black Power. These are, again, a continuation. I see a picture there of H. Rap Brown, as he was known back during that time. And
Yeah, this
I
is
live
the 1967 National
where I live
Conference.
now. Again, you're speaking
1967.
it, Alita, but it's just coming across as a buzz. I can't understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Um,
Can you hear me
but
now?
this period in the late 1960s, the question of Black Power, the
Yes.
civil rights movement was shifting a little bit from the question of civil rights and the Voting Rights Act and the March on Washington in 1963, and all of these things that were a part of our movement in that period. And so the question, the movement kind of transformed itself into raising questions of Black power and Black liberation. And so, there were many organizations that were involved in that period in organizing around the question of our liberation. And this is some of our important history in terms of the ongoing struggles that we've waged as a people, and the dedication of many revolutionaries over
Yeah.
the years in fighting, for our liberation.
Not,
In
I don't
'68,
know.
another Black Power conference. Um, so are these were virtually a continuation of the so-called Negro conventions for liberation, but these national conventions that would gather regularly in order to enact a strategy, of how to, uh, first how to overturn slavery, and then during the Reconstruction period, to politicize our communities and to fight for our needs, which were denied, and we were stripped of a lot of rights through terror. And of course, the advent of Jim Crow came, and so it took another 100 years or so before our movement again was able to harness itself and apply the kind of direct action, passive resistance in the form of civil rights against the system, and then it transformed itself into the fight for Black power and all that meant into various parts of our community. So
Yes.
this is we've always had a history of struggle and a history of fighting back, and I'm so grateful to have begun my life as a part of this movement and struggle for the liberation of our people.
And this is perfect timing on where now if you can introduce the organization and what's next.
Okay, I think it's hard to hear you there, um, but one of the things that we see in this period, of course, the strength of that movement, the movements that we had in the 60s, 70s, was caused the reaction of the state, tremendous amount of repression. Of course, all of these assassinations took place, but there were also direct interventions into our movement organizations and attacks on our leadership in order to, make it, in order to undermine the strength of our struggle. So this was something very, very important, and it had consequences. A number of forces who were active became political prisoners as they were arrested for their various acts of resistance that took place in that period. And then there was a counter-revolution or a counter-reaction to the advent, the gains that were made during the Civil Rights Black Power movement that brought to fore in the 1980s, starting with Reaganism, a reactionary movement that elected Ronald Reagan to the presidency, and brought in an advent structural changes within the economy of the United States, and so a number of organizations began, fighting in different forms. One organization that was formed coming out of the Revolutionary Nationalist tradition was Black Workers for Justice in North Carolina. I was a member and still am a member of the Black Workers for Justice. And so we began organizing in the workplaces across the South, particularly starting in North Carolina, organizing black workers on the job. And it, we followed in the tradition of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers that emerged in Detroit in the 1970s. So we carried that work into the South and began organizing workers on the job, and building for consciousness around the need for black working people to have trade unions in order to upgrade their living conditions and working conditions on the job, and as a part of a strategy for the liberation of our people in the 20th century. So very, very important developments occurred there. And but this period is now, as we are, sometimes we use the phrase how our movement has ebbed and flowed. And so the 60s and 70s were a period of flow, and then the 80s and 90s became kind of an ebb in the movement, brought on by the repression that we experienced, and the change in political and economic conditions in our community. And so now we find ourselves in a new era in the 21st century, where we're beginning to have to address the question of the crisis that has enveloped our people, and and working people in general, and poor people and oppressed people within the United States and around the world. And so that has shown itself in the emergence of the election of Donald Trump, and the kind of reactionary policies and outlooks that he brought to the fore. And this has caused another crisis to emerge of capitalism that's enveloping our community. So we're faced now with some of the policies of capitalism that are undermining and attacking our community. Actual pandemic that's attacking the health. The results of these centuries of oppression. All of these things are impacting our community the most. The number of our workers are, the number of workers from our community are among the front line workers that they're calling, that have to be on duty during the pandemic in order for society to function. And yet we're there under the banner of extremely low pay, unequal pay and conditions, and exposure, during the pandemic, and having the kind of equipment, response from management and support to protect our communities for these frontline jobs. So it's we're facing, a crisis, and then the reemergence of the most reactionary forces possible in this. Our community is facing outright murders. For example, the young white who went to church and that have taken place. Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor.
Let's see. It may have been the sound. We may be losing your voice like mine. And what we'll do is continue online for Facebook. So this is imperative. Wow. Try again, Nashaki. Let's see if we can have you online for Facebook. We'll try to finish online. Echo cancellation.
and the tradition of the Negro Convention. Trying to find some national thrust to midnight the Black Devotion movement, and that's been, that was a very important effort. Many of us, including myself and many others, were there as a part of the Congress and helping to organize and to build a Congress. That that was a tremendous settlement in that period. But now, today, as a result of the national crisis that our community has been faced with, we are looking at them, some of the key questions that have to be answered in this period in the 21st century with regard to the liberation of our people. So that has not been raising the question again of unity. Bringing all of the Black liberation movement together, to create a new strategy, a unified national struggle to the dire conditions of crisis that our communities faced and oppressed, and the nationalities within the borders of the United States are faced with, as well as around the world. And so we've been constantly pushing and putting the court, since these last couple several decades, called the international movement and unification of all forces of the Black liberation movement, working together, coming together, that developing from a strategy that we believe will allow us in the 21st century to live better people. And lessons from the 20th century that took place worldwide against colonialism, neocolonialism, and against the capitalists and imperialists West as it oppressed communities all over the world. And so the emergence of independence, revolutions and movements from Latin America and Asia to challenge the system, the system of oppression, capitalism, imperialism, and the patriarchal, that is the oppression of women, subordination of women within the systems, all working together. Us, people throughout the world and within the United States itself. And there's certain lessons to draw from. Those that we saw in a number of geographies, for example, China, Vietnam, Cuba, various struggles in Africa, particularly the Guinea-Bissau struggle, for example, the PAIGC, all of these revolutionary movements challenging the system of U.S. And Western imperialism as it, has and these struggles, China, Vietnam, Cuba, were very successful in overturning the control of the purchased in U.S. imperialist countries here in the state. And in this period, it's very, very important to draw lessons from those struggles in the 21st, in the 20th century to lessons in the 21st century. So we know our history of revolutionary nationalism. I think the question of national liberation, is a certain for it's a movement to examine and understand it, to
conditions here within the United States, and what is the correct way forward in this to finally liberate our people. And so, for me, the question of mercy, the central question that we should all be examining, studying, and learning about as we move in this period to try to reemerge the national black liberation movement. So the kind that engaged in this period is the kind of the national black liberation movement initiative, an organization that a process that we've enacted the organization of the United States, including the Democrats and Georgia Democrats, the peace, some forces from the American People's Organization in the past. Everybody died the minutes. Then Professor Jackson and many others, those involved in the political prisoner work, cooperatives across the country, activist groups have come together to to help launch this national call. And so what we're organizing right now is a series of what we're calling a national dialogue with regard to the reemergence and rebuilding of the black liberation movement. And how do we see it in this field? What do the liberation organizations such as
And Ashaki, yeah, I hear my voice in the back. So I would like to say that although our sound levels have been tampered with, we will continue this on a platform such as YouTube, and just so that you all can get the rich information that Ashaki is giving. This is not something we have before. So again, please stay tuned for us, and knowing that we will have this screening again on YouTube and Facebook. We don't want people to feel that if sound levels and technology are to blame, hey, we can continue on a different platform. And so I think that's very important in our liberatory work. And we're so grateful to have Ashaki. Again, we want to hear more about the National Unity Initiative. We want to hear more from Ashaki. So what we will be doing this week is recording live or recorded on YouTube and Facebook, where we can have essentially sound levels that will work for us. I'm going to try to bring Ashaki back one more time, and we're going to close out our show. We are so grateful that you all understand it is our duty, despite the kinks, despite we see as things that happen for liberatory people all of our lives. COINTELPRO was an example of this type of tactics, where when we were trying to get the word political education to our people, there were always something to stop us. But we have always come through. We have always been resilient. And even in political education, we will stay resilient. We will put ourselves on Facebook and Instagram and any other platform, because we know what this is about. We know, again, the things that are against us. We know how COINTELPRO purposely took our telephones, Martin Luther King and everyone else, so that the word didn't get through. In Timbuktu, they burned the books, but we, our ancestors, have come through in writing material and manifestos and information. And we cannot, it's imperative that we allow you all to remember to read. We cannot remember what has gone through with technology, but also in book writing. Timbuktu was information about who we were as a people, and European colonialism burned all that information, just as many other places. And so it's important that you all read about this and join us on other platforms. And remember that although we have a speaker that has been, hopefully if we can bring her back, she will be able to talk again. And we will, again, Ashaki, have this dialogue on our platform during the week. Okay, that's fine. So if you can lift your fist with me, sis, and we say this, fist, fist, yeah. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our change. This is the third segment, weekly segment of a political education we call It Is Our Duty. And we thank you for joining us. Thank you and have a good night. Love someone near you. The third segment. This is the Black Love Day. This is a love for our people, and we thank you, and we're grateful to join in with you on this day. Good night.